When Hollywood's biggest star met late night's sharpest tongue, the result was explosive. What began as a standard promotional interview quickly devolved into one of television's most shocking confrontations, leaving a studio audience stunned and a network scrambling for damage control. The air in Studio One of the El Capitan Entertainment Center buzzed with anticipation. The Jimmy Kimmel Live audience, already energized by the house band's performance, erupted into thunderous applause as the show's producer signaled Tom Cruise's imminent entrance. The megastar was making his first appearance on the show in nearly 3 years to promote his latest action blockbuster. Jimmy Kimmel adjusted his tie and flashed his trademark smirk toward the camera. "Tonight's guest needs no introduction," he began, his voice carrying that familiar blend of irreverence and charm that had become his hallmark. "He's jumped on my couch, he's jumped off buildings, and he's jumped to conclusions more times than I can count. Please welcome the man who refuses to age, Tom Cruise." As Cruise bounded onto the stage with his signature enthusiasm, the audience rose to their feet. His million-dollar smile was in full effect as he waved to the crowd, seemingly impervious to the subtle barb hidden in Kimmel's introduction. The two men exchanged a handshake that lingered a beat too long, their eyes meeting in what viewers would later describe as a silent assessment of boundaries. "Great to have you back, Tom," Kimmel said, gesturing for his guest to take a seat. "Thanks for having me, Jimmy." Cruise settled into the guest chair, adjusting his perfectly tailored navy suit. "It's been too long." 3 years, Kimmel nodded. "A lot has changed since then." "That's Hollywood for you," Cruise laughed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Always evolving." The first 5 minutes followed the standard celebrity interview formula. Light banter about Cruise's new film, a clip showing the actor performing his own stunts, audience reaction shots of wide-eyed admiration. Cruise was in top form, sharing anecdotes about filming with the practiced ease of someone who'd been navigating press tours for 4 decades. The atmosphere shifted when Kimmel casually glanced at his note cards, a mischievous glint appearing in his eyes. "So, Tom, I've got to ask about something that's been making the rounds online," Kimmel began, his tone deceptively casual. "There's this photo of you at that fundraiser last month with—" "The film's fundraiser was incredible," Cruise interjected smoothly, attempting to redirect. "We raised over $3 million for veterans' families." Kimmel's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's commendable, sure, but I'm talking about who you were photographed with. People say a lot of things, Jimmy," Cruise replied, the wattage of his smile dimming slightly. "What matters are actions, right?" The audience sensed the subtle tension crackling between the two men. The camera caught Cruise's fingers drumming lightly against his knee, a rare tell from an actor known for his controlled public persona. Kimmel leaned forward. "Right. Actions. Speaking of actions, I've always wanted to ask you about your relationship with—" "Are we still promoting the movie?" Cruise interrupted, his laugh now hollow. "Because I've got some great stories about working with—" "We'll get back to the movie," Kimmel waved dismissively. "But come on, the people want to know about the real Tom Cruise, the one who's connected to all these controversial figures that most celebrities wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the playful banter they'd expected. Kimmel's tone had an edge that cut through the usual late-night pleasantries. The camera operator instinctively tightened the frame on Cruise's face, capturing the momentary flicker of surprise before his media training reasserted itself. "You know, Jimmy," Cruise said, his voice dropping to a more serious register, "when I come on these shows, I do it to share my work with fans who've supported me for decades. I'm not sure what you're trying to do here, but—" "I'm just asking what everyone's thinking," Kimmel shrugged, doubling down. "You can't expect to pal around with certain individuals and not have people question it, especially given your unique personal history." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Kimmel's producer made a subtle slashing motion across her throat from behind the camera, the universal signal to change course. but Kimmel deliberately ignored it. "You've always been careful about your image," Kimmel continued, his voice hardening. "So careful that sometimes people wonder what's really going on behind those perfect teeth and carefully crafted statements." Cruz's jaw tightened. For anyone familiar with his filmography, it was reminiscent of the look that preceded his most intense on-screen confrontations. But this wasn't a movie set, and the words coming next weren't from any script. "I've respected you as a broadcaster, Jimmy," Cruz said quietly, "but I'm starting to question whether that respect was misplaced. Is this really the kind of interview you want to be known for?" The audience collectively held their breath. The cameraman panned to Kimmel, whose expression wavered between momentary hesitation and stubborn determination. For a split second it seemed he might back down, redirect to safer territory. Instead, he doubled down. "What I want to be known for is asking the questions other people are too afraid to ask," Kimmel replied, abandoning all pretense of lightheartedness. "Like why you continue to associate with people who've been credibly accused of—" "Careful," Cruz said, the single word carrying the weight of decades spent navigating Hollywood's most treacherous waters. "Very careful." The commercial break couldn't have come at a more opportune moment. As the "We'll be right back" graphic flashed on monitors throughout the studio, audience members exchanged wide-eyed glances. Staff members rushed onto the set, converging on both men. Heated whispers carried across the stage, though microphones had been temporarily muted. When the broadcast resumed 3 minutes later, the tension was palpable. Both men sat straighter in their chairs, the casual postures of early conversation replaced by rigid composure. Kimmel's producer hovered just off camera, ready to intervene if necessary. "Welcome back to the show," Kimmel said, his voice noticeably strained despite his attempt at normalcy. "We're here with Tom Cruise discussing his new film." He paused, then abandoned the pretense entirely. "Actually, before we continue, I think we should address what just happened." Cruise raised an eyebrow. "I think that's a good idea, Jimmy, because what just happened crossed several lines. No one in the audience dared to cough. The confrontation brewing before them was unprecedented in late-night television history, and they knew it. Social media was already exploding with clips from the first segment, hashtags forming and trending in real time. "The thing is, Tom," Kimmel began, leaning forward with renewed intensity, "when public figures use their platform to elevate certain individuals or causes, they become fair game for questioning. That's how accountability works." Cruz's eyes narrowed. "Accountability? That's what you call ambushing a guest with personal attacks disguised as questions?" "There's a word for that, Jimmy, but accountability isn't it." The stage lights seemed to intensify, highlighting the beads of sweat now visible on Kimmel's forehead. Whatever had been planned for this interview had veered dramatically off script, and there would be no return to the safety of promotional banter. The bridge had been crossed, then burned, and what happened next would change late-night television forever. "You want to talk about accountability?" Cruz stood suddenly, causing Kimmel to flinch backward. The audience gasped collectively as the actor loomed over the host's desk. "Let's talk about the responsibility you have to your viewers and your guests. This isn't journalism, Jimmy. This is cheap sensationalism." Kimmel recovered quickly, his smile turning sardonic. "Sit down. Tom, you're making a scene." There was a nervous titter from the audience, quickly extinguished by the ice in Cruz's stare. "No, what you're making is a mistake." Cruz didn't raise his voice, which somehow made his words cut deeper. 20 years in this business and I've never walked off a set. But there's a first time for everything." The show's director frantically signaled for a camera change, but the primary cameraman remained transfixed on the confrontation unfolding. A production assistant whispered urgently into her headset, presumably to the control room. "Do we cut to commercial?" Kimmel's producer shook her head vehemently from the sidelines. The ratings would be astronomical. This was television gold, however uncomfortable. The network would rather apologize afterward than miscapturing what was happening. Come on. Tom? Kimmel's tone shifted to placating, though insincerity dripped from every syllable. We're just having a conversation. Isn't that what you're always saying in interviews? That you want honest dialogue? Don't twist my words, Cruz replied, still standing. There's honest dialogue, and then there's whatever this ambush was supposed to be. He gestured to the note cards on Kimmel's desk. How long did you spend planning these spontaneous questions? Did you ever consider asking me directly instead of blindsiding me on national television? Someone in the audience shouted, "Tell him, Tom," before being hastily shushed by those nearby. But the interruption seemed to embolden others. Murmurs of both support and dissent rippled through the crowd. Kimmel's face flushed. He was losing control of both his guest and his audience. Uncharted territory for a host known for his ability to navigate awkward moments with humor. But there was nothing funny about this situation. If you can't handle a few tough questions, Kimmel said, his voice hardening again, maybe that says something about you, not me. There it is, Cruz nodded, as if Kimmel had just confirmed something. You're not interested in answers. You just want to provoke a reaction. Well, congratulations. He adjusted his suit jacket deliberately. You've got one. The studio fell into absolute silence. Even the house band had stopped their subtle background music, captivated by the unfolding drama. Kimmel tried another tack. Look, maybe we started on the wrong foot here. Let's restart and talk about your film. No, Cruz interrupted, his tone final. We're well past that. You've made it clear what kind of show this is, and it's not one I want to be part of. He turned toward the audience, addressing them directly. I came here tonight to share something I'm proud of with you all. Instead, it's turned into this. I apologize that you're not getting the interview you expected. The actor's pivot to the audience was masterful, instantly repositioning himself from defensive celebrity to wronged professional. Several audience members nodded sympathetically. Kimmel sensed his control slipping further. So you're just going to walk off? That's your solution? His tone was mocking now, a risky strategy born of desperation. I thought Tom Cruise never backed down from a fight. Cruise turned back to him, his expression almost pitying. This isn't a fight, Jimmy. This is you trying to boost ratings at my expense. He paused, then added with devastating precision. I wonder if you treat all your guests this way, or if there's something specifically about me that makes you think it's acceptable to bring my family into it. The mention of family sent a visible shockwave through the studio. During the commercial break, Kimmel must have touched a particularly sensitive nerve. The audience, initially divided, began to shift perceptibly toward Team Cruise. I didn't, Kimmel started, but Cruise cut him off with a raised hand. You did, and you knew exactly what you were doing. He turned to leave, then pivoted back for one final statement. You know what the difference is between our jobs, Jimmy? When I play a villain, everyone knows it's just a role. The remark landed, like a thunderclap. Someone in the audience actually applauded, triggering a smattering of others to join in. The sound engineer quickly lowered the microphone levels, but the damage was done. Kimmel's face contorted between anger and professional panic. Late-night hosts lived and died by their likability. And right now, that currency was draining away with every passing second. We'll be right back after these messages, he managed to say, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. But before the cameras could cut away, viewers witnessed something unprecedented. Tom Cruise walking deliberately across the stage toward the exit, microphone still clipped to his lapel, broadcasting every footstep. The audience fell silent, collectively, holding their breath as reality sank in. They were witnessing the implosion of late-night decorum in real time. A production assistant lunged toward the control panel, desperately trying to cut Cruise's microphone before he could say anything else. She was seconds too late. For the record, Cruise's voice rang out clearly through the studio speakers. I've Always been willing to discuss my work, my choices, even my beliefs. What I won't do is sit here while you use my family as clickbait." He pushed through the stage door without a backward glance, leaving Kimmel standing alone under the merciless studio lights. The network feed cut to commercial with almost violent abruptness, but not before capturing Kimmel's expression. A mixture of shock, embarrassment, and the dawning realization that he had miscalculated catastrophically. In the control room, pandemonium erupted. "Get him back!" the executive producer shouted into her headset. "Somebody get Cruz back here now!" But the security team reported what everyone already knew. The actor was already being escorted to his waiting car, his publicist running interference against the paparazzi, who somehow already sensed blood in the water. When broadcast resumed, viewers were greeted by a visibly shaken Kimmel attempting damage control. "Well, that was unexpected," he began, his trademark smirk nowhere to be seen. "Clearly, Tom and I have some different opinions on what makes for good television." The attempt at humor fell flat. The audience, normally so ready with supportive laughter, remained uncomfortably silent. Someone coughed. A phone chimed with an incoming message, the sound extraordinarily loud in the tense atmosphere. Kimmel shifted in his chair, tugging at his tie as if it had suddenly tightened around his neck. "We'll be back with Sarah Paulson after the break," he finally managed, signaling desperately for another commercial. The cameras cut away, but not before capturing the exodus beginning. In the audience, dozens of people were already standing, gathering belongings, heading for the exits. The implied rejection was unmistakable. They had come to see Tom Cruise, and in his absence had little interest in whatever salvage operation Kimmel might attempt. Backstage, Sarah Paulson was already texting her publicist. "No way in hell am I going out there. Get me out." Within minutes, the show's producer would be informed that their second guest had developed a sudden migraine and would be unable to appear. By midnight, the incident had gone viral. Clips spread across social media platforms with the speed and ferocity of wildfire. Cruise Control and Kimmel Cancelled climbed the trending charts, accompanied by increasingly heated debate. Celebrity reactions poured in, some defending Kimmel's right to ask tough questions, most expressing solidarity with Cruise's refusal to tolerate personal attacks. "About time someone stood up to the new bully of late night," Dwayne Johnson tweeted, a sentiment quickly echoed by dozens of other Hollywood figures who had endured their own uncomfortable moments in Kimmel's chair. Even Ellen DeGeneres, still on thin ice after her own controversy, weighed in. The line between humor and humiliation should never be crossed, especially not on television. The network executives gathered for an emergency midnight meeting. Overnight ratings showed a paradoxical spike. Viewers had tuned in en masse once word of the confrontation spread. But advertisers were already calling, expressing concerns about their brands being associated with what one marketing director described as ambush entertainment. In Cruise's hotel suite, his publicist fielded calls from every major news outlet, while the actor himself remained characteristically composed. "We're not making any statements tonight," he told his team. "This isn't about me or Jimmy. It's about basic human respect." He paused, then added with faint weariness, "And it's about my daughter, who doesn't deserve to have her name dragged through this circus." The following morning, the story dominated entertainment news. Industry analysts dissected every second of the exchange, debating who had emerged victorious from the confrontation. But the public verdict was surprisingly decisive. In comment sections, on call-in shows, across social media, support overwhelmingly favored Cruise. "Never thought I'd side with Tom Cruise on anything," read one typical comment. But Kimmel crossed a line tonight. "That wasn't an interview, it was an ambush." By noon, the network released a carefully worded statement, expressing regret for any discomfort experienced by Mr. Cruise, while stopping short of directly criticizing their star host. Reading between the lines, industry insiders recognized the unspoken message. Kimmel had gone too far, and damage control was now the priority. Kimmel himself remained uncharacteristically silent throughout the day, his usual social media accounts dormant. His representatives issued only a brief statement. Jimmy has always prided himself on asking the questions others won't. He respects Tom Cruise's decision to leave the interview and wishes him well with his current project. The calculated neutrality fooled no one. Behind the scenes, sources reported that network executives were engaged in tense discussions about the future of the show and whether Kimmel's increasingly aggressive interview style had become a liability rather than an asset. 3 days later, the fallout continued to reverberate through the entertainment industry. Publicists for major celebrities discreetly informed Kimmel's bookers that their clients would be unavailable for the foreseeable future. The implicit boycott threatened to deprive the show of the A-list guests it depended on. Then came the announcement that shocked Hollywood. Jimmy Kimmel would be taking an extended hiatus from his show, effective immediately. Network spokespeople framed it as a long-planned break, but the timing left little doubt about the actual reason. In his place, a rotation of guest hosts would take over, beginning with, in a twist few could have predicted, Tina Fey, whose reputation for incisive but never cruel comedy stood in direct contrast to what Kimmel's had become. 1 week after the confrontation, Tom Cruise held a press conference for his film. Journalists in attendance had been explicitly warned that questions about recent television appearances would result in immediate removal. But one reporter, ignoring the directive, asked whether Cruise felt vindicated by Kimmel's hiatus. The actor paused, considering his response carefully. "I don't take pleasure in anyone's difficulties," he said finally. "This industry can be challenging for all of us. I wish Jimmy well with whatever comes next for him." With characteristic discipline, he redirected. "Now, about the film we're here to discuss." Behind the scenes, however, an unexpected development was unfolding. Kimmel, humbled by the experience and the overwhelming public reaction, had reached out through intermediaries to arrange a private conversation with Cruise. After initial hesitation, the actor agreed. What transpired in that conversation remained between the two men, but sources close to both parties described it as surprisingly constructive. Kimmel allegedly offered a genuine apology for crossing personal boundaries, particularly regarding comments about Cruise's family. Cruise, for his part, acknowledged the legitimate role of challenging interviews while emphasizing the difference between professional accountability and personal attacks. 2 months later, when Kimmel returned from his hiatus, now widely understood to have been a network-mandated cooling-off period, viewers noticed a subtle but significant shift in his approach. The caustic edge that had increasingly defined his interviews had been tempered. The mean-spirited jokes at guests' expense, once his trademark, were notably absent. In their place was something closer to the Jimmy Kimmel of earlier years. Irreverent but not cruel, challenging but not combative. Ratings, which had plummeted during his absence despite the rotating star power of guest hosts, began a slow recovery. As for Cruise, the confrontation ultimately worked in his favor. His film opened to stronger-than-expected box office numbers, with analysts crediting the Kimmel effect for raising his profile at precisely the right moment. More significantly, public perception of the actor shifted subtly but meaningfully. The narrative of controlling celebrity who can't take a joke was replaced by professional who stood up for himself and his family. 6 months after the incident, in an interview with The New Yorker, Kimmel reflected on what he described as a necessary wake-up call. "I forgot something fundamental," he admitted. "These are real people sitting across from me, not just content generators. Tom Cruise reminded me of that in a way I needed to hear, even if it wasn't comfortable in the moment." The magazine noted that Kimmel's ratings, while not fully recovered to their peak, had stabilized. More tellingly, A-list bookings had gradually resumed as publicists cautiously re-engaged with the show. The final chapter of the story came almost a year to the day after the confrontation. To the shock of the entertainment world, Tom Cruise was announced as a guest on Jimmy Kimmel Live, his first return since walking off the stage. Speculation ran rampant. Would it be awkward, staged, confrontational again? It was none of these things. Instead, viewers witnessed something more valuable. Two professionals who had learned from an uncomfortable experience, engaging in exactly the kind of substantive, occasionally challenging, but fundamentally respectful conversation that late-night television had originally been designed to showcase. As the segment concluded, Kimmel addressed the elephant in the room directly. "I want to thank you for coming back, Tom. Not everyone would have." Cruise's response was characteristically measured. "We all deserve second chances," he said simply, "and sometimes the most important conversations are the difficult ones." The ratings for that night's show were the highest Kimmel had seen in years, but more significantly, they represented the formal conclusion to what had become known throughout the industry as the walkout, a moment that had forced everyone, from hosts to executives to viewers themselves, to reconsider what they really wanted from celebrity interviews. In the end, it wasn't about winners and losers. It was about recalibration, finding again the line between entertainment and exploitation, between challenging and cruel, between the person and the persona. And in that recalibration, perhaps everyone had won after all.